You hear that, fam? I'm hoo-hawing you all day long. Hoo-hawing you.
Hoo-ha! Hoo-ha!
Or I can give you this. Hold on, wait.
I somehow prefer the dolphin. Yeah.
Why do you? Well, what about this? There are a lot of donkeys out there, though, fam. There's a shit ton of donkeys out there, and they are exposing themselves every day in this world that is a fucking cartoon, fam. Craziness going around. How you doing over there in Moscow?
I'm okay, fam.
I see you got the straight hair look, trying to get more Guidette, right? A little bit more of that New Jersey in you. Is that what you're trying to do? Show that,
Fuck out of here.
Oh, Sam.
Oh my God, what a fucking nightmare.
What a nightmare.
It's
just the most obnoxious accent in the world.
Why do you keep trying to imitate it? Why do you keep trying to imitate? Oh, fam, you try to. Don't be hating on my Italian ladies out there.
God, I can't. Actually, I would rather hear her over and over 1,000 times than AOC. Okay. I didn't put it in the folder, but AOC is out there defending big tech again. This isn't the first time she's done it. She did it a long time ago. We talked about it. She's just oh God. I'm glad people are calling her out though. I mean, it's nice 4 years later,
Wait a second. She's defending big tech again. I didn't even see this. What is she doing?
Yeah, she went after
she
was defending Mehdi Hassan's bogus anti-Twitter files bullshit. I still think the Twitter files, the way it was released is really sketch, but like the whole liberal agenda is to say that there's just no proof and blah blah blah. And it's just so ridiculous because she was the one, remember, who sent people who have the email. I still have the email. She sent an email where she told her followers to go after anybody that was being mean to her. Yeah. And people got their profiles taken down and she instructed them to do that. And here she is. It's like she's come full circle, Even the people who used to like her are like, yeah, well, she's just a radical liberal. We can't expect more. But they still won't really like fully admit I mean, we supported her at one point, but we admitted that years ago. We were like, okay, no, when she started like doing the shit, like that's what you do. If you a lot of us here who started this, us, Jimmy, everybody, we at one point supported these people. And then we were like, yeah, no, they're doing shit wrong. I don't know why these people can't call it out. They just can't admit when, okay, like these people are not who you thought they were, and that's fine. They won't admit it. They're just like defending these people. Yeah.
Well, with the whole Mehdi Hassan thing, fam, I think that we might have to put it at the end of the doc if we want to go into it a little bit, because it is really, to tell you the truth, what was so disingenuous about it is that Mehdi Hassan tried to just like selectively pick at areas where he misspoke or used a different letter or misrepresented it. He didn't go out the actual meat and potatoes of what Matt Taibbi was trying to talk about, which was election stuff. And we know firsthand, I mean, Mehdi Hassan, we could tell you firsthand, we're a network that's been demonetized for talking about elections pretty much. I mean, that was the main thing we've gotten strikes about. It's in their vague fucking guidelines. And after that letter that AOC did send out, shortly after, all of us were demonetized on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And Nico's been out there talking about his experience. Was it a burner account of hers? She did answer in the first person. You know what I'm saying? It is kind of like, it was one of those things that was like almost like an oops. I don't know. He went on InfoWars yesterday. I'd like to see that episode, but we can tell you firsthand, and this is very fucking true, that, big tech censored any talk about elections. And we were simply pointing out the structure, the framework, the way they are run, and then explaining and showing what we witnessed overseas in Nicaragua, Honduras, Peru, Colombia, Brazil. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like we were purposely going, oh, we're just doing this conspiracy that the paper's coming in from the Chinese and whatnot. We were so on point because we understood the system, how it works, and that's why we were demonetized. That's why we're censored. And it was really disingenuous for Mehdi Hassan to try to go at that and pick these little fucking things that are insignificant then to the greater argument or the greater subject or the most important meat and potatoes of this topic was that you could not talk about elections.
Right. And even though I do believe like the release of information is definitely controlled, to whom that information is released and everything, because at the end of the day, now years later, people are seeing that when we said it like a long time ago and we were demonetized and censored and all of that. But, you know, it's like, oh, it takes a billionaire to release information to certain picked out journalists. I think that's something you can criticize, but to try to pretend that this is not like that, none of that happened, that people's accounts weren't censored for talking about election stuff, and that there was really nothing behind it is ridiculous. And I think that's my problem with the liberal argument. Even though like you could potentially criticize the way the information was released, they're not criticizing a legitimate thing. They're just criticizing because they're covering their ass. And that's all. That's the only reason, because they benefited from Twitter's algorithm. And then you have like NPR crying about being labeled US state affiliated media, which is hilarious because they receive funding directly from the government. And during the CARES Act, I believe there was a certain amount that was allotted for NPR during the COVID. Like the bill that was given, there were certain amounts that were allotted for NPR. And what is it? Sugar Bear, as Steve calls her, was reading specifically saying NPR is independent journalism. She had this piece of paper and she was reading from it. Like, you don't, like, come on. Like, it's just so obvious. And it's not just NPR, by the way. You should have CNN labeled. You should have BBC labeled. You should have all of these, MSNBC, all of them should be labeled. But
yeah, but I think technically the fact that it's National Public Radio, it's in there, you know what I'm saying? It's
yeah, of course.
directly.
But
I mean, that's why they can do that, you know. I listen, fam, we know, like, we believe this too. And this is why we've been ousted or thrown out of a lot of the liberal echo chamber left, is because we've said things like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're working directly, colluding with the government. They did it on COVID. They did it on the elections. You know what I'm saying? They are paid ridiculous salaries. That's not newsworthy salaries. And I'm not, you know, hurting on anybody who wants to make a living and make a few bucks, but these guys are propagandist actors to the fullest degree, getting paid a tons of money to lie and spew all this propaganda. And a lot of them are still aren't backing down, fam. And we'll get into that because the way they handled this situation over here with the first topic with NATO accepting Finland to come in, it's like everybody's all fucking hypnotized and zombieized and over on the New York freaking arraignment with Donald Trump. And while that's going on, the world is just fucking melting and blowing up behind us. And this is just really another thing. Like, there have been two big pieces of information, I think, in newsworthy that have not been talked at all. One of them is Japan. Let me make sure I say it right in Spanish. Japón, right?
Yes, fam.
Okay. Going along with Russia and saying, hey, you know what, we'll trade in your dollars over here. We'll buy above, market price, the market cap price, in which, you know, that was the thing that, you know, Biden and Macron, and I forgot the dude's name in Germany now, Schultz, I believe it is, were wagging their finger. Don't you buy above that cap price over here. We're going to control the market. The West is going to control it. And Japan's going, nah, fuck you. And people aren't going, yo, if Japan is doing this right now, and now we got Saudi Arabia talking to friggin' goddamn Iran, and Saudi Arabia brokered by the Chinese, which is, once again, I am not talking down upon that happening as that's a bad thing to happen, but it does spell doom for the American dollar. And people need to understand that. And they're walking around not even care, except Donald Trump gets arraigned on some bullshit fucking charges, and they're going crazy. And this happens, fam. Finland is now a border country, fam, right? With freaking, I mean, it's right across a lake. Helsinki, Moscow to Helsinki is not a long drive. NATO accepts Finland to come on in. Fam, you can see how close it is with this map right here.
So I'm going to do that. Huh? I'm going to go from St. Petersburg to Helsinki the next time I fly home, and I'm going to do it that way. because it's you go to St. Petersburg, which is like 4 hours from Moscow by train, or like an hour, less than an hour via plane. And then you take a bus because they stopped the trains. There used to be trains from St. Petersburg to Helsinki, but they've stopped the trains because Russia is sanctioned and there's war with Russia, as they've admitted. So now you can only take a bus if you are a European or a US citizen or a non-Russian. You cannot go through from Russia to Finland if you're Russian, and that's not Russia's doing, that's literally Finland's doing. And so now they're going to put NATO weapons on Russia's border, because if you look at the map, that is literally Russia's border. So they want to surround Russia with NATO, and they're mad because Russia and Belarus made a deal, because Russia's like seeing this play out and they're like, we're not going to allow this. We're going to put our weapons. And so then Macron goes to China and he's like, I think Russia is escalating things by doing this deal with Belarus. And everybody's like, what do you mean? We've been putting our B-16s and all of our nuclear weapons on the border of Russia for decades, and the border of other countries for decades. Why is it okay that the West does it? So that's what's going on. And if anybody thought that Macron was going to convince Xi Jinping of anything, you are not paying attention, because that's never going to happen.
Sorry for playing that loud, but this is right now. You know what I'm saying? Now we're seeing strategic nuclear equipment and missiles heading to, I don't know where this is at, Viborg. And you know that town, fam?
No, but you should turn that music down all the way.
It's too loud? I'm sorry.
No, it might get us a copyright.
There it goes. But they're mobilizing, they're moving weaponry around. This is not what we wanted to see, fam. And I have Jeffrey Sachs right before it happened. This is like hours before it happened, talking about what this would mean and what this spells. Do you want to say anything before I play this video?
No, go ahead, play the video.
All right, fam.
On this idea, Finland said today that they hope to make a decision on NATO membership. Now, bearing in mind Finland's well and truly in the Western camp, member of the EU, etc., etc. Would you? But the same argument applies. You take it with Finland. You take NATO's border closer to Russia. Would you be in favor of Finland joining NATO?
I think it would be so reckless and provocative at this moment, rather than having some prudence and pushing on the diplomatic line to get Russia out of Ukraine and to agree that NATO is not going to enlarge into Ukraine. You know, halfway around the world in a tiny little island in the Pacific, in the Solomon Islands has drafted a security pact with China. It's a tiny island. And yet the United States is going out of its mind, sending senior national security officials to the Pacific. How dare you sign this thing? The threat that this poses. You know, this is how America feels about a small island signing a security pact with China. But then when it comes to the United States pushing into Ukraine in NATO, we say, well, why is Russia concerned about that at all? And what we're doing by this is not finding the path to peace to get Russia out of Ukraine. And so we say we're defending Ukraine, but actually Ukraine is being destroyed in this process in the name of something that isn't defending the country at all and isn't solving any problems and is creating an increasingly severe global economic crisis.
Jeffrey Sachs.
That's the problem.
Jeffrey Sachs. Well, Jeffrey, we'll talk more.
Fam, your thoughts?
First of all, like, the fact that they have him on it is like crazy to me. That he gets away with saying that, but only someone like him could get away with it. Yeah, I mean, he's right. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's really escalating everything. Russia is going to counteract that as they've done. as they're going to continue to do. And Russia's not going to give up on this. I don't think people, when I say that, I mean that. Russia is not going to give up on this because, again, both Russia and NATO see this as an existential war. NATO sees it as existential to his existence. Russia sees it as existential to his existence because the whole point of NATO really has been to really break up Russia and destroy it and make it a part of the West. And the reason Russia is opposing this entire agenda now is because they know if they don't do it, that's exactly what's going to happen, because that's exactly what every single politician, every single intelligence asset, every single paper that's been written about what to do about the Russia situation by the West has literally said that that's what they want to do to Russia. So for Russia, they're just like, okay, we're just going to continue doing this until we can't. And now Russia is going to has China, has other powers on their side, and not just these powers, but people who have pretty much been screwed by the West rising up. And that's why you're seeing in South Africa, you're seeing this across the entire continent of Africa, you're seeing it across the Middle East, you're seeing all of this, even Turkey pretty much building its relationship with Russia. Today, the two foreign ministers of Russia and the foreign minister of Turkey, Sergei Lavrov, and his counterpart met, and they had a discussion. And basically, even though Turkey wants to remain neutral in many ways as possible, the economic relationship that it has with Russia is not neutral. It's extremely intertwined. So it's, even if these countries say they want to remain neutral, they know that economically they do better to go towards BRICS, to go towards what's going on this side of the world. So it's gonna screw Finland. It's gonna screw the people of Finland. Again, they have zero problem, the United States and NATO, throwing Finland under the bus, just like they had no problem throwing Ukraine under the bus, and they have no problem throwing Poland under the bus, just like they had no problem screwing the entire economy of the EU and screwing the entire economy of Germany. They're going to continue doing this, and they're destroying Germany. So that begs the question, is that done on purpose? I think to a degree it is, because they don't care as long as they can maintain some sort of like tyrannical control.
Fam, I saw this here. I had to put it on there. I thought you'd get a nice little chuckle out of it. You know, it's one thing that they're fearing right now is the sight of the sight that is most feared by every Russian man, an angry Finnish soldier rushing towards them. Fam, on skis. Look at this here. You're going to love this here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fam. They must be, you got to get a report in Moscow. They must be shaking in their shoes when they see this coming running at them, fam. You can run, but you can't hide from the Finnish. And they're coming, fam.
Yeah, no one thinks of Finland and is like, oh my God, Finland. Like, they're a tiny little country. What Russia's like, okay. All right, what else you got? Throw it at me.
Well, I got this here. This is the 31 flags flying together as a symbol of unity, fam, and solidarity. They can easily take that word solidarity and they just twist it. That's something that's been twisted by the leftist progressives in California. We're standing in solidarity for Ukrainians when they were marching with the Ukrainian flag. Well, what the fuck does that mean? Who are you standing in solidarity with? I mean, I can say that I'm standing in solidarity with the Cuban people, right? And I think that that's the cop-out for a lot of people to not focus on what's going on politically when it comes to Ukraine, that is, okay? Let's park Cuba for a second because I don't want to put that over there because I just recently said that. And of course, I can stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. I think they're the victims here more than anything. Just like the people of the Donbass were the victims for so long and still are, whatnot. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes we use that. We just throw that out there like a bumper sticker promo and a point of view. And we ignore the actual causes of this war, the actual proxiness, the way we took over the Ukrainian government. And now, you know, pushing this here, I think it's disastrous as well. Take a look, fam. I'm going to put it on up real quick, but the flag. There we go. NATO.
This is an historic day. we welcome Finland as the newest member of our alliance. We will raise the Finnish flag for the first time here at the NATO headquarters. 31 flags flying together as a symbol of our unity and our solidarity. This is an historic day.
So that was that. I do have something else. I have a high I'll put it up here really quick. I mean, I don't know. I just had to show that, Sam, fam, because that's what they do. They throw the flag up, the music. This is standing in solidarity. This is an act of unity. Now we have 31 out of 35 or whatever it is countries now. This is a good thing. You know, I mean, there's an old friend of ours. He wasn't that close of a friend, but a guy who hung out at the Bernie Diner. And there are some people, because of Bernie Sanders' movement and going to this whole Putin is the worst guy ever, have kind of gone to that mentality. And despite calling themselves progressives or liberals, and they want to constantly say that you're censored or you're speaking at the behest of the Kremlin, and I'm a Kremlin asset and stuff. And I'm throwing. Here's the thing. We had on Wyatt Reed earlier this morning. We knew Wyatt before he took that job full-time as a writer at Sputnik. We knew Fiorella. Me and Fiorella have worked together for 5.5 years now. And I can tell you, she's only worked for RT for less than a year. Her rhetoric and her voice is still the same. Nothing has changed. Nobody's telling her that she can or cannot speak certain things. So it's ridiculous to think this way. If you would simply look at what's going on, if you were a real progressive, if you were a real leftist, you would be against NATO expansion. You would be against what the United States has done, and constantly still does to this day with their foreign policy. And what they've done in Ukraine was awful. We don't just have smoking gun proof that the United States was involved. We have smoking bazooka proof of the government being replaced by our lackeys and the people we wanted in there. Why? Because we wanted another Afghan-style fight for the Russians on their border again to bleed them economically. And by doing so, we don't care if we use the Ukrainian people as pawns. We don't care about how many of them die. They don't even care at the end of the day if they lose the war. In fact, I think they are getting ready to lose this war, and they are sending signals that they are losing this war because all they care is that they had the war. Because just like the COVID-19, where they had billionaires made or billionaires pad in their pockets even more, existing billionaires and stuff like that, it was about the gravy train. They didn't care about the repercussions because the repercussions aren't real. They're going to get away with it. And so is Biden and Bush and all these other people who got away with propagating these wars. And if you're a real leftist or progressive, you would have stood against that. And that's why we started this channel, because a lot of you guys in that area was so ignorant to what was going on outside your borders. And you scream racism, fascism, holy racism. What can be more racist than using our foreign policy, our military, than to go around this globe and bomb and kill and sanction and starve people out and cut off medical supplies? What could be more racist than that? So you need to get with the times and see how disgusting this is, and see this right here, this move right now, as nothing more than more trouble, than more of a chance for nuclear war, than more of a chance for a world war. Sorry, fam, go ahead.
No, I mean, what's more to say on that? Nothing more to say. I mean, I just feel like it's repetitive at this point, you know, like it's just so obvious. I don't know how people can they just want to let themselves, they've given up internally, and they just want to allow themselves to be part of this new liberal order, which is like the progressives, and that's all they want to be a part of. So by the way, Ukraine just bombed the center of Donetsk. As I have friends that are on their way to Donbass now, and Ukraine has just bombed yesterday the center of Donetsk, where they killed people in an auto shop, an auto center. And there's no reason to bomb Donetsk city center at this point, because everything has moved right now towards Artyomovsk, Bakhmut, which is pretty much all in Russia's control, and everything's moved in that direction. So there's really no point in bombing the city center, but it continues. So
Yeah.
That's that. And that's where our funding is going, essentially. And also to Israel, which we'll talk about later, what Israel's been doing, but they've literally been, of course, getting away with everything. So, and that's one of the things that I get mad at everybody for, is their coverage of Israel and how they've whitewashed everything it does.
And this is something important. Matthew, thank you so much. Nagatai, I hope that's how I say it right. I probably got it wrong. Nyak Natai. But so right. And to destroy ancient culture too. I mean, you know, the thing that was so crazy about Iraq, which a lot of people learned later on, is that, you know, they made this about like a religious war. Oh, this was, you know, Christians going bombing Muslims and stuff. In Iraq, there was some of the most concentrated areas of Christians in that region, and now it's all wiped out clean. And they've killed a lot of ancient culture in these spots. And I know, like, a lot of people point to the Taliban when they first took over Afghanistan a long time ago, before the United States occupation went in there, the way they were bombing Buddhist statues and stuff. Yeah, but that's who we propagate. That's who we fund. That's who we put forth as these crazy people. You know what I'm saying? And Bill Bradley also said the world war has already started. And I'm telling you, this is the start of war with BRICS. It does not end with Ukraine and Russia. And then he followed up with this right here. This is an attempt to bleed Russia's military, to weaken them, so they won't be able to come to the aid of the Chinese when we attack China later. And there is a lot of credence to back that statement. And here it is. Now you got this high-ranking EU official, Josep Borrell Fontelles, and this is Patrick Henning, who says, visibly aroused at turning Finland into a NATO cannon fodder, because they don't care. They don't care. They'll fight to the last Ukrainians.
Today we are welcoming Finland as a new member of NATO. With that, 22 out of 27 members of the European Union are at the same time NATO's members. We hope that Sweden will come soon. And this makes the European Union closer to NATO, and both together stronger. And together we have been working on supporting Ukraine to defend from the Russia aggression. The European Union is committed to continue an engagement, a constructive engagement with China in order to solve the global challenges. We need China to solve the global challenges, and we want to develop a constructive engagement with China. But China, we expect to behave as a positive, a constructive global player, in particular in front of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, which is a violation of the United Nations Charter.
Yeah, so let me translate. We expect China to do what we want them to do, what the NATO bloc, US-led NATO bloc alliance wants China to do. We expect China to do and act as we say toward Russia, and forget the fact that the violations of the NATO charter that have happened with Israel, that the United States has violated, that Ukraine has violated. We're just going to talk about Russian aggression because it's just so much easier to gloss over the reality of everything else. But guess what? Guess what? China isn't going to listen to them. China is literally not going to do that. And I'm going to talk about China in a second, but they're really not going to do that. So it's it's really condescending. I believe it was either him or one of his lookalikes, because they all look the same to me, that talked about the jungle of Europe and the garden of Europe, and everywhere else is the jungle. So honestly, they can keep their garden because it's falling apart. It's literally everything is infected with all of this bullshit that's coming out, and the rest of the world is together combined has far more people, has far more resources, and the only reason Europe is anything and the United States is anything is because they've been exploiting the resources of literally everybody else, and all these countries are like saying you won't do that anymore, and that's what's going on here. They make it like Ukraine is the most important thing since sliced bread. Ukraine is a tiny little country with like a military that's not that powerful, one of the most corrupt places in the entire world, literally doesn't have much of natural resources save some good land and territory that is mostly on the eastern part of Ukraine, which is mostly now Russian territory. And they want to convince the American public that it's their number one priority to sacrifice their firstborn and everything else for Ukraine. But if you stop and think about it, you're like, wait a minute, why is Ukraine so important? Because it's not about Ukraine. Ukraine's just the excuse. It's literally about destroying Russia and China behind it. That's all this is about.
Chris, this is General McGregor we're going to put on here, and he makes such a great point, fam. I'm just thinking about it. And when you think about it, opting out of neutrality as a way of peace is really dangerous, right? In other words, sometimes just acting neutral and not advancing, right, into these other countries is a form of extending an olive branch. All right, we were thinking about having Finland join NATO, but we're going to hold off and not do that right now until we work out the situation in Ukraine and, Russia and Ukraine. But that obviously just shows their whole fucking ass. And this is McGregor. Take a look. It's a little quick clip. And I put the Russian words down below for all you peeps out there so you can see. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm good like that.
How crazy is it in the midst of this war to double the size of the Russian NATO border by adding Finland in the midst of this war? What do they expect President Putin to do?
Well, I think the Finns know that Putin is not going to do anything because he doesn't feel threatened by Finland, and he doesn't understand why the Finns have done this because the Finns haven't felt threatened by Russia. It's a very strange set of circumstances. The Russians have no interest in going to war with the Finns and vice versa. But what we have tried to do is eliminate neutrality as a solution.
Right.
And that's unfortunate. I'm surprised that we're not also trying to force the Austrians into joining NATO. I don't think that would go well, though, right now, because as we know, when Mr. Zelensky spoke to the Austrian parliament, the right wing of the Austrian electorate all stood up and walked out
and left.
Same thing effectively in Hungary. I think those people, the Finns, I think once they examine this more carefully and get past the propaganda, the same lies, the same phony narrative that comes out all over the United States about the evil Russians and their war crimes and all this nonsense, I think they may reconsider. I wouldn't be surprised. But NATO itself is on fragile ground. People don't understand behind the scenes, all is not well.
Fam, we've eliminated neutrality as a solution. And that is really a shame. And I love the way McGregor put it. You know what I'm saying? The fact that we're doing this, we're taking off the table. And this should really show you, everybody who's sitting there, who's trying to say that the sole aggressor is Putin and the Russian Federation. This shows you right here. They're not even willing to remain neutral, fam.
Yeah, and what he said is correct. Like, we are escalating the situation by doing this in terms of like eliminating neutrality, in terms of Russia now saying, "Oh, you did this, so now we might like defend ourselves in terms of putting our weapons in certain places." But is Russia going to go and attack and start a war with Finland like they're making it out to be? No, because Finland isn't a threat to Russia, and it's never been a threat. It's like it's like whatever. Like, they're laughing. They're like, "What are you doing to yourself?" Because that's all this is. It's going to backfire on Finland, and there's a reason why the Finnish prime minister lost, right? The former and she. And just, I think people are realizing in the EU that things are not well. Like he said, behind the scenes, everything is actually pretty shitty. So,
fam, I'm going to love the next section because I want to get into it. It's so important. But that is the section right there, ladies and gentlemen. Finland is now joined NATO. That is not good news. You should be pushing back against it. You should be speaking up. It is really not what we wanted if we really were in the mood for peace in that region of the world. It does suck that it's happening. Guys, thank you for everybody else who's watching right now. If you're a premium subscriber on Rockfin, the 26 people that are hanging out, please do us a favor, like and share that. If you're on Rumble, there's only 40 people. What's going on, guys? You're sleeping today? couple hundred people on YouTube. We know it's Friday. It is Easter weekend, but do us a favor. The best way you can help out the show is to like, share, and subscribe.
No idea it was Easter weekend.
Yeah, I know because you're over there in Russia. Heathens.
No, I've abandoned Catholicism a long time ago.
Heathens.
I am.
What's going on here?
So, Jesus, we spent such a while on that section. So this section is important because I do think that there's a lot happening, and I kind of wanted to talk about it all. So there are allegations that Saudi Arabia is going to end the war on Yemen. None of this has been confirmed outside of Twitter. So I want to err with caution here, but this has been mentioned that there is a Saudi delegation that's going to travel to Sana'a next week to formulate some sort of agreement, according to Reuters, and to people familiar with the situation. Now, this is very vague, and I wouldn't go full out. That's why you haven't seen me tweet anything and say that this war is ending, because it's very reductionist to say that it's just going to end like that. Like, it's going to be a whole process. However, back when there was a Saudi Arabian and a Syrian conversation, and a Saudi Arabian and an Iranian conversation, that was something that was on the forefront to talk about the potentials of these relationships now coming together, especially with Saudi Arabia and Iran, because that really just sort of gives the opportunity for there to be diplomacy about Yemen. We've said this from the start. So I do think this is going to be a huge possibility for it to happen in the future. It's going to take some negotiation on both ends. It's going to really do a lot. But to me, the significance, even though this is going to be a long process, the significance of it even being on the table and it happening now says a lot about the timing of where we're at, because everything is happening so fast right now. We're seeing the relationships between Syria and Saudi Arabia. We're seeing the relationship between Syria and Iran. We're seeing the relationships, the pan-Arabism and the rising of all of that. We're seeing things sort of build up in BRICS. And so I think this is just in addition to everything that's been happening. I do think this is more of economic need rather than some sort of Saudi Arabian come to Jesus moment about Yemen. Like, this is where the world is going, and you're going to get left behind, and your countries are going to get left behind if you stick with the West and what the West wants. And all of these countries are realizing that, and they're like, okay, so we got to go where everybody else is going, because otherwise we're going to be isolated. Because in their attempt to isolate Russia and to isolate China, all that's happened is these countries have found each other, and Russia standing up to the West is how it's perceived in Africa. It's how it's perceived in parts of Latin America, in parts of the global South, and in parts of India, Pakistan. All of these countries, they have been forced to rely on relationships with each other for so long and build up on those relationships. And even countries like Sri Lanka. Last week, I had an interview with two officials from Sri Lanka, where they were saying Russians are going to Sri Lanka for tourism, and there's projects at work. And so Sri Lanka doesn't want to really continue relying so much on the IMF. I had a talk with a Nigerian gentleman today about the IMF and what it's done to other countries, and how it's pretty much the World Bank has enslaved countries in Africa to keep a hold on them and a dependency on them. And so what we're seeing is a flip of all of this. And I think it's important to point out the potential that's there in these Arab nations and these countries that have so long been interfered with, that have been sanctioned, that have been just completely brutalized by Western intervention. And they're coming back and they're saying, hey, all right, let's, you know what, maybe we've been doing this the wrong way here. And it's not necessarily, again, ideological, but I think that's at this point, I don't care that it's not ideological. I care that it's happening. And I think you're going to see a huge shift in the dominating currency will no longer be the dollar. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I also think it could be impactful if Saudi Arabia, as Pasta mentioned, does begin taking far more actions.
Yep. I put down below, if true, does China deserve credit for brokering peace between Iran and Saudi
Absolutely.
Arabia? And the reason why I want to put this down is because there's been a lot of people who have accused this network or these people over here that we are standing for Russia and China. Like we are waving the flag and we're all in no matter what, and we're glorifying them. And I don't think we ever have. I think we've always said, well, listen, if we're going to compare the superpowers that are at war with each other, and basically one of them is on the defense, one of them is the ultimate aggressor, one of them is not the ultimate aggressor. They're actually just reacting to the actions of the empire in the West. Now, there are people out there who said that you can look at China and say, hey, they're good for not going around building bases everywhere. But what they are doing in this region, in particular, selling drones to the UAE, and China and Russia, both last year voting against stopping sanctions in Yemen and a security council in the UN, right? Pretty much voting against the interest of Yemen, and they should be held to account. But I think what happens is people didn't look at the long game and understand what the long game was about. I never thought that we would have a time in which the Chinese can come in and wrestle away the interest of Saudi Arabia from the United States. Saudi Arabia has always existed as a country because of the United States empire. It's a puppet monarchy that was thrusted up many years ago, and they agreed to always sell their oil in the petrodollar, in United States dollars. So therefore, that gives actually credence to our currency. In fact, it's one of the only things that's holding our currency up is the fact that oil from Saudi Arabia, where there's a lot of it that is there, is sold in American dollars. So the Chinese actually played the long game. So when you can say, and once again, I'm not going to say what they did was okay, when the things, the votes they made in that UN Security Councils, both Russia and China, the fact that the Chinese did sell drones to the UAE, and this is something, the video of them I'm going to be posting tomorrow. Me and Carl Zai got the artwork and everything up. We talked about this, and this is an area in which Carl Zai even said that no, this is where you can hold some criticism against China and Russia for doing so. But the long game is now that China has come in and brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is something the United States was against. This is all why a lot of people believe that the Trump administration killed, assassinated Soleimani, because Soleimani was looking to build a bridge of peace between the two countries that have closed down their embassies in both of the countries, prospective countries. And we didn't want that to happen. As long as Saudi Arabia was always at war with Iran, and at least politically, and we've seen, I mean, if you ever watched the Crosstalk episode with Mohammed Morandi and a representative of Saudi Arabia from the kingdom, it was just brutal. It was awful the way they looked at each other. But now China, playing the long game, has come in and has brokered a peace deal, and this actually might mean the end to what the war has happened in Yemen. Remember when Biden came in, fam, what was the first war he said he was going to stop? This war. Did it ever stop under the United States trying to broker a peace deal? No, never stopped. In fact, it intensified when Biden even doubled down and sold the kingdom more weapons, which would be used against Yemen. Not to say that China didn't have a fault to play over here for providing drones, but at the end of the day, they're the ones who came in. They're the ones who brokered a peace deal. And if this is true, right, we can scale down this war in Yemen, then you have to give some credit, and the Chinese government deserves some credit for brokering this peace deal between these two nations. And once again, I'm saying that looks like a better way. This is a better model than the United States. Not to say they shouldn't ever be held to account for any bad things they do, or selling weapons to a country that will be used to kill other peoples in other countries, like they were to be in Saudi Arabia to kill Houthis. But if this is true, fam, this looks like a better blueprint and a better way forward. No?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to move on to Brazil, but I do want to say that China and Russia have kind of been on the fence with the whole issue because they look at this as trying to play peace referees to play neutral parties in the conflict. This is the same way that China and Russia, when they're not involved in the conflict, view any sort of regional dispute. They today also, and I'll talk about this later, on the Israel end of the situation. It's one of the most frustrating things to me as somebody that is a huge Palestinian advocate of how Russia has tried to play the mediator. Same with Turkey, and same with other nations. But I think, again, I've said this before, it's coming to a point where they're going to have to choose to really what side they stand on. And it's not going to be an ideological choice as much as we want it to be. Even though they do recognize and call out Israel when they do something wrong, they still try to maintain a relationship with Israel because they see this as a necessity to stopping a full out war in the region. And that's practicality in terms of how politics plays a role versus in terms of how, as an activist or a supporter of what's going on in Syria and Palestine, we may see it entirely different. However, the relationship between Syria and Russia has substantially grown, and Turkey's relationship with the Arab world, with Lebanon and Palestine and Syria, has risen in importance, as has its relationship with Russia. So Israel is really on the losing end of this as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I do want to point out Brazil.
Well, one second. I want to make one comment about this too here, because somebody said China and Saudi Arabia have always been business partners. Yeah, but they've never sold fucking oil in yuan or bought it in yuan. You know what I'm saying? Now they have. Now they've agreed. They might have always been business partners, but this move is taking it another step further. China brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that is huge, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead, fam, with Brazil. I'll put it up for you.
Right. So, I mean, there's just so many people in independent media. They get so many accolades for just going around calling Lula a Soros puppet 24/7 and just really giving this reductive analysis. And I find this to be true with several different topics, like the China situation, like the Russia situation. And in terms of Lula, like I said, while there is criticism that's worthy, in terms of Brazil, you have to understand that the politics of Brazil is pretty much focused on getting it out of poverty. There's so much crime in Brazil, so much inflation. It's not in a good place. And so their focus right now is to get its economy back up. And BRICS is going to be the way to do that. So Brazil is not going to go and do the bidding of Soros and Biden. Like, that's just not reality. And I'm sorry, I am going to say you all were wrong, because literally what is happening is proving otherwise, not because Lula is some sort of like radical, but because it's out of need. It's not ideological or a leftist perspective at all. This is an economic perspective. Once again, here we are. So there is a report that China and Brazil have already begun working on a peace proposal. And this is true because I know that there's going to be a meeting between Lula and Xi Jinping. That is a fact. And so this peace proposal is just going to be yet another one brokered by China, this time in addition to Brazil. Why? Well, because these are two major participants of BRICS. And so Lula is due to visit China on April 11th, from the 11th through the 15th. And again, there have been talks between Brazil and Russia. And Lula has also commented on the whole situation, again, increasingly going from neutral to also saying we need to respect Russia's wishes, understanding. And you can pull the next one. I don't know if you have anything to say about this.
Well, I do have something to say about this. This is huge right over here, because this is really important, because I think, fam, when we went to Honduras, I think we both had a little bit of change in perspective. Maybe you didn't. I'm going to speak for myself. I had a little bit of change in perspective about what really goes on in Latin America. You know, and there is some sort of concession, some type of playing ball with the West, because we have to realize that how many coups we've propagated throughout the West all the time. Lulu was thrown in jail with the help of the West. Manuel Zelaya, when we were in Honduras, we realized this, that he joined Alba less than a week later, they couped him. So I think there is a dance of sorts of the way you get things done, you know, and I don't necessarily, if it's playing, it's making concessions, but it's playing the game. And I think, really, to tell you the truth, the more time goes on, the less critical I am becoming of Lula. You know, I have an area where I'm a little upset. I think he should shut his mouth when it comes to vaccines. Any vaccine, I feel that with anybody, like that's just a personal choice, my body, my choice. I don't like that entity, but that's just one area. And it's like Camilla told us when we went there and we got very much educated on Brazil, is that most people don't care about that. They care about the economics. They care about having chicken, eggs, milk in their refrigerator, being able to eat. And the economy from Brazil under Bolsonaro went from number 7 to number 14 on the world stage. It fucking crumbled. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, that was the COVID, whatnot, and it was politicized. It doesn't make a difference. Lula had great economic gains for 2 terms. Okay. He almost eradicated extreme poverty over there. And when Bolsonaro went right back into place, he went and attacking the MST, which is the agricultural base, the indigenous agriculture base, and he attacked them. And he pretty much let in multinational corporations come in, and the small farmer pretty much went away. Right now, I heard there's some chirping in the background now that maybe the MST feels a little bit like they want a little bit more attention from Lula. But these moves that Lula is pulling, you know what I'm saying, where he went along, where a lot of people are like, look at what Lula's doing. He's voting against, you know, Russia or whatever in the last UN session. But then he goes and does something like this. And it's going to take savvy politicians, people who know how to get things done in Latin America, to pull it off right. Because there is a lot of Western influence. There's NGOs fucking polluting the whole place, whether it be Colombia, whether it be Brazil. And there's a way to get things done. And the more we go along, the more I am going, wow, Lula, screw you, everybody else. This guy is pulling off some moves. And this right here, fam, I think is huge. Just huge.
Yeah, and I think what's also huge, apart from, I mean, I'm not surprised at the relationship with China because they're a part of BRICS, and Brazil would be committing suicide to not have a good relationship with China. They're their biggest economic relationship. So it wouldn't make any sense. And if people would get outside their little theories, then they would be quickly able to see that on a practical level, on an on the ground level. And we see this because we've been on the ground. Like there's a lot of people that opine on things that have not gone to these countries that they're talking about. So it's just kind of like, to me, why would I take anything you say seriously at that point? But Lula's also, apart from meeting with Xi Jinping, he also talked about how NATO should not be at Russia's borders, specifically, obviously referring to the inception of, or the inclusion of, Finland. Also, he talked about how there should be a attention paid to the new regions of Russia, and how Crimea shouldn't even be discussed, and how Zelensky may not end up with the things he wants to end up. He specifically said that. He had also said that Russia is a guarantor of long-standing peace in the world. These are very big things to say specifically, because I think it really outlines how other countries besides Western ones view Russia not as an evil axis of power, but as bringers of peace. And that goes back to the Soviet Union and World War II and what Russia's role in that was. And so I do think that Lula saying this out loud, especially to a lot of people who thought he was just going to, take Ukraine's side or whatever, really says a lot of where Brazil's going. And again, it's not because Lula is some sort of pro-Russian, Kremlin-loving, bot, or he's like, it's somehow doing, like, I don't know, he's like some radical, like, communist. It's because BRICS is hugely important for Brazil's economy, and Russia is a partner, and China is a partner. So they have to work with these countries that are looking to really stop reliance on the sinking greenback, the sinking dollar. And that's it. And that's it, guys. They might individually, people might have ideological, stances. Everybody does, desires. But at the end of the day, when you're overseeing a country and when you're working with all sorts of economic needs, you have to really first and foremost look at how do you get this country out of the hole that it's in. And Brazil is in a serious hole, and it's got to get out of it. So it would be suicide not to have a good relationship with two major world powers at this point.
I'm going to say that this is going to be used by, as the proper term, fam, cannon fodder by the conservative, the right populist movement. We told you Lula was a puppet of the Chinese government and stuff like that. Dude, that is one of the reasons why a lot of people within the Bolsonaro government wanted him gone, is because he was cutting off his nose despite his face. He was part of BRICS. Brazil was part of BRICS. A lot of people thought they might jump out because of the Chinese entity. Bolsonaro obviously wanted to do some type of dealings with Russia coming out of the BRICS summer meeting, striking a deal for diesel gasoline with Putin and the Russian Federation was one of the decent things he's done. But other than that, there were people in his own government that were like, what is this guy doing? He's killing us economically. You know, we joined BRICS. We're dependent on China. We want to do business with China. We want to do business with China more than the United States. Mm-hmm. And that was the whole thing about Lula, why they wanted to get him out. But now they're going to use this, fam. I mean, literally, the Epoch Times, which is the Falun Gong, which is a bunch of crazy who run the Epoch Times, is pretty much putting out reports that the Chinese government, that Leonardo DiCaprio, this is a Zero Hedge article, I'll grab it. Leonardo DiCaprio spilled the beans and talked about China, funding Obama's campaign in 2012. So they're even going back there doing this bullshit over here. They're going fucking crazy right now, and they're going to use this moment right here to strengthen the fact that China is more of it. Because little Jackie Posobiec tweeted it out, right? Little Jackie, who can't have a conversation, is talking about it's a fugitive, they're a fugitive, whatever. Like, please, you get funded by a fugitive. Miles Guo is not even allowed back in China. He's hiding from the Chinese government. He's an ex-descendant. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. But they're using this, fam, to amp up and saber rattle a war with China. And they're going to use this right here. But this is good for Brazil. This is good for the poor people of Brazil. And I look forward to seeing what else can happen, what more can happen. Fam, did you want to use this one, or should I go to the next one?
No, we can go to the next, because this is a very important topic that I just wanted to cover a little bit.
Brazil, huh?
Yeah, that's it. That's it on Brazil, or section 3.
What do we got here with this?
This is section 3. So, guys, Israel attacked the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's one of the most popular mosques basically in Jerusalem. And Israel decided to raid this mosque, right? And you can see in the video that Paz is showing. And there were Muslim worshipers, but I have a hard time just saying Muslims, because what Israel does and what people do is say, well, this is just a religious fight against, Muslims and Jews. No. This is literally Israel once again attacking Palestinians in particular. So they basically raided this. They started using batons, rubber bullets. So steel cased rubber, bullets encased with rubber on the outside, rubber bullets on people. And one 14-year-old boy was severely injured. A lot of people were injured and arrested and just beaten, as you can see, like that for no reason. So according to Israel, they say that there was these young men that went in the mosque, and they barricaded themselves inside with rockets and weapons. And then the resistance, the Palestinians and the Palestinian outlets say they were doing that because they knew they were going to be attacked. So they were getting ready to protect the mosque. And so that's a different information you're getting. But of course, Israel says they were justified because they had rocks and all this stuff. It's the same shit. Like, they had rocks, they had fireworks. So we're going to go in and brutally beat them. And then we're going to continue bombing, because in the last few weeks, maybe just a week alone, Israel had bombed Syria, had bombed Lebanon, had bombed, the usual Israel doings. So then this happened, and that was a red line for a lot of people. This was a red line, not for Palestinians only. The Palestinian resistance is used to this sort of behavior from Israel. But it was a red line for countries for Lebanon. It was a red line for specifically Turkey. It's been a red line for other Arab nations. This is a month of Ramadan. This is the holy month of Ramadan. You don't disrespect the holy month of Ramadan. And this, as Christians, people were speaking out. People who were Christian were like, wait a minute. So you're disrespecting not just Christians now, you're disrespecting Muslims and a holy month. This this month, this region means so much to so many religions, particularly the big three, right? And there was no respect, complete and total disrespect, complete and total just attacks and escalation. So people spoke out in unison. Even the UN said that this is Israel needs to stop their escalation. And the UN, they like to say things when it's most obvious. They were appalled that Israel's doing this. Have you paid attention to anything that Israel's been doing the last few years? So
I'm going to play this video real quick so we can hear the screams. Convo Couch, guys, share us out. Rumble, Rockfin, YouTube, all the platforms. You can hit us up at our Twitters. All the links to all the ways to help out the Convo Couch are in the description. We love you. Happy Friday. This is sad.
So again, this was a red line because it happened during the holy month of Ramadan. So the whole point is, even if you're at war with somebody, there's supposed to be peace during this month. It's supposed to be something that's a huge deal for a lot of people who are Muslim, people who are Christian even. And it turned out to not be that. So there's Israeli soldiers said this Twitter person turned the Al-Aqsa mosque into a war zone. Just imagine if Muslim military did the same thing to a church, synagogue, or temple. That's the thing. We would never hear the end of it. If this was done to a synagogue, we would say this is like Hitler again. And I'm not calling for people to go attack a synagogue. I think, that would be wrong too. But at the same time, Israel is an occupation. It's an occupation. That's the reality. This is occupied East Jerusalem. That's the proper way of saying it, occupied East Jerusalem. And whenever I report anything, I try to make sure that it is heard in that way. Because again, when the news reports it, they have to show the Israeli side. I had to interview an Israeli person the other day, and that was extremely difficult for me. It's one of the most difficult things to do because I don't believe that there are two sides to this. I don't believe that. I mean, obviously there's 2 points of view, but I believe, just like I believe the aggressor is the US, NATO, and Ukraine, the Ukraine army against Russia. I believe that the Israelis are the ones that are the aggressors on Palestinians, on Syrians. I see it every day, and it's really just astonishing to me. And so whenever people freak out, oh my God, Israel was just hit. Oh my gosh, this is it to me. And then this is a response. Again, this is a response. Israel has the Iron Dome. They have endless funding from us, from the United States. And they get told that they can do whatever they want because Israel has the right to exist. Israel has the right to defend themselves, right? Even though they're in occupation, they have the right to defend themselves. That's what we get told. But when anybody, whether it's Palestinians, Syrians, Hezbollah, Lebanon, Hamas, like, oh my God, like anybody says, okay, we're going to defend ourselves against Israel, you're a terrorist. And that is, to me, the biggest enraging thing when there's just so much hypocrisy on that. So what ended up happening was that dozens of missiles were fired from Lebanon and hit northern Israel in response to the storming of the Al-Aqsa mosque. So you can play the videos, fam, but I just want to say, while you play the videos, I specifically was trying to figure out who was responsible, because different people were saying, okay, it's Palestinians. Other people were saying it's Hezbollah. Other people were saying, no, it's both. It's an axis of resistance is the best way I've seen it just described. An axis of resistance. Yes, Palestinians. Yes, elements of Hezbollah. But again, these are axes of resistance. This has been building up for a long time. And again, Israel is consistently every day hitting Syrians. Every other day, because Vanessa Beeley she talks about it all the time. She's like, oh, they just hit Damascus like 3 days ago. They hit Damascus. So what does this mean? What does this mean for the general regional conflict, fam? I do think this is coming to a breaking point. I don't think it's going to spell out a global conflict just yet, but I do think that because of everything that's happened, it's set up a chain of events. So the Al-Aqsa Mosque was a red line that was crossed. In turn, the axis of resistance attacked Israel, responded to Israel with aggression. And then in turn, Israel's military launched their air attacks on southern Lebanon and the Gaza Strip, following, of course, the rocket attacks on Israel. So that's been the last few days. And the reason I know so much is because literally I've been working, and this has been pretty much on just covering like everything that's happened since the Al-Aqsa raids. And it's kind of like, for me, it's like, well, what does this mean now? Now you have to have something happen, because I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but Israel is having its own internal dispute between Bibi Netanyahu and other factions of the government. And people were trying to paint Bibi as this guy that, he wants to tackle.
He's fighting the globalist, fam.
Globalist. No,
it's a color revolution. Get the fuck out of here.
So many people got that wrong. It is not a color revolution.
I mean, god damn, that was so ridiculous. His 4chan pulling QAnon son, BB son, pulling up that bullshit. You got to be fucking kidding me if you believe that bullshit.
There's no way.
And so Israel struck back. They hit southern Lebanon, fam, and the Gaza Strip following a spate of reported rocket attacks on the country. And obviously, they were going to hit back really quickly. And yeah, I mean, you knew this was coming, did you not? I mean, we all knew this was coming. It's like, okay, they're going to fire back. They're going to go crazy.
But they've been looking for that excuse to fire back. And Bibi also said their enemies will pay the price of what they've done. When have your enemies not paid the price? I mean, every other day, Israel plays eeny, meeny, miny, mo as to which country they're going to bomb, whether it's Lebanon, Syria, or Palestine, because Palestine is still a nation, right? And it's pretty much almost gone, but they still exist. And so that's what's been happening. And I've been getting reports from Palestinians that this could spark a major new intifada, right? Another big pushback against Israel. And this is what they're afraid of. Israel says that they're afraid of the intifada. A lot of people may not see it that way, but let me say this. I do think that what we're seeing with what's happened is the rise of pan-Arabism. We're seeing these countries come together, not just against the United States, but the United States is lacking Israel in the Middle East, because without Israel in the Middle East, you would have pan-Arabism. Without the enslavement of Libya and the murder of Gaddafi, you'd have a united Africa. You'd have Pan-Africanism. You would have had that a long time ago. You would have had that at least 10 years ago, right? Like around that time. But Gaddafi was assassinated by the West. Soleimani was assassinated by the West. You have the West continuously trying to stop the emergence of a unified coalition of people in the global South, of people in the Middle East, of people in the East. And so that's what it's becoming clear that that's exactly what the foreign policy was about. And if it wasn't clear already, but it's telling to me that Turkey today had a meeting. I don't know if that's next on the thing or
no.
Where are we?
Next clip is hashtag I love Kim Iverson.
Oh yes. So
I mean,
Kim's
right.
right,
Like,
she's
listen,
right.
Kim, like, she gets so much criticism for some other shit and stuff like that. And I get it. We're her friends, and we love the girl and stuff. But when
I
this
argue
topic,
with Kim all the time.
What's that?
I argue with Kim all the time.
Yes.
Sometimes. Like I'll argue with Kim, but when she's right, she's right.
And she's great on this. Because why?
She's been there.
She got up off her ass and she went to the fucking region. And this tweet is great, fam. Go ahead and read it, but read it in your Kim
So-
voice. Do your Kim impression. You got long hair like her today. Come on.
I can't do my Kim voice. I can't do it.
I don't want to do it because
my
I don't want her to get
God.
mad at me.
I feel like if I do my Kim voice, it'll be like my Kim voice after she drank like, 4 glasses of wine, and she's like,
Fam.
So Kim said the propaganda against Palestinians should be studied in schools as the blueprint on how to manufacture consent. It's impressive. Not only do people view an entire population as people as terrorists, but their eyes glaze over as they proudly proclaim, "I stand with Israel." This is exactly my problem. Like, people do it subconsciously sometimes, and I've caught myself correcting people on this. Like, they'll say, Israel responded, or Israeli military responded with, rockets against militants and Hamas terrorists. It's like, wait a minute. Why are you calling them terrorists? And Israel is just an army. Are you saying like that they're not allowed? So they're automatic. Palestinians are automatically terrorists. And this goes all the way back to the war in Iraq and how we were told that pretty much every Muslim person was a terrorist in order to manufacture consent to go into war with Iraq. And then, of course, Afghanistan as well. And you were just basically grew up. If you grew up in middle America, which I was in like central US at that time, where everybody was a Republican and Bush won with literally like flying colors, you were told pretty much that all brown people, all Muslims were a bunch of terrorists, and that they wanted to come to the US to impose their radical Islam and Sharia law. Like, literally, that's what you were told. And as a child, you were told that. So it's no surprise to me that we have the same point of view of Palestinians, because it's that extensive. And I thought that was a really good tweet. She got a lot of pushback from a lot of her followers, because a lot of her followers are on the right and they support Israel. So it's like, and she's got a lot of followers on what's that place called? It's an Israeli site. Lifestyle life.
Oh,
Do
I
you know
don't
what
know,
I'm talking
fam.
about? Okay, it's another. I don't know. They asked me to be on there, but because of that, I said no.
Okay.
Anyway,
Let's talk about a John Moose tweet over here, because I don't think this is the greatest tweet. I don't think this is a way to, like, I get the White Lives Matter more, but
I know you say that, but to me that doesn't bother me, because I'm looking at the content.
Because it doesn't bother me because it personally offends me. It's just a divisive method of way of doing things. You know what I'm saying?
I think the more divisive thing is what's happening, though.
But it's more about geopolitics, I think. And when he uses the term fascist, he's using it in the wrong way. So, I mean,
I don't think so. I think Israel is
fascism is corporatism. I mean, but once again, I'm going to accept it. Whatever you want to use it as.
I mean, it is. It's not just. That's not the only definition of fascism. There's several elements.
It was changed and morphed and stuff, so they can use it for these reasons over here.
No.
Fascism
the definition of
is
fascism,
corporatism.
It's not just corporatism, Pasta.
That's when it was invented. But all right, I'm going to accept it.
It's one part.
I got it. They changed woke. They changed liberal. They changed fascism. I got it.
No. It's one part of the definition of fascism. Fascism was never just corporations, Pasta.
It was originally corporate. It was the merger of corporations and state. It was morphed and changed after when it was originally invented. It was one element
of it.
When Mussolini, fam, don't tell me what my people did. Mussolini,
fam, that's not the only definition of fascism, though.
I know, because it was changed. It's not the original definition.
No. Right. Fascism also includes the element of separating people based on whatever, not necessarily just skin color, but ethnic appeal. So the reason I don't separate Zionists from fascists, I think they're the same thing. That's why I'm okay with this tweet, because he said the fascist, white supremacist, colonial government of Israel. That's exactly what they are. They literally look at Palestinians as they are less than human. They literally look like they colonized the entirety of Palestine. Okay. And it's fascistic. There's no difference between fascist and Zionist. And they literally don't get any sort of accountability. They're told that they are allowed to do this and impose this. And I don't really care if people find this offensive just because it includes the word white supremacist. Because in this case, I firmly believe that that's exactly what it is. It's not the only element, but it is. I mean, Palestinian, you have had to, I forget, there's an interview, somebody went to Israel, and the things they said about Palestinians fit right in it was.
Oh yeah, the Gray Zone's done some great work on this. It is a racist nation of sort. Absolutely, the way they treat Palestinians too as well.
So why is?
Because white supremacy kind of implicates. I think it's like white duping, right? Because here's the thing: at the end of the day, we understand there's a ruling class now that wants to kill off everybody. Some of the most egregious COVID numbers came out of Israel, and it was all the Israeli population that jabbed themselves off and killed themselves off. They killed them because at the end of the day, the ruling class doesn't care just about white people over everybody else. They give white people, like Reverend Annie Chambers said, they give them more advantages, they give them more privileges because it keeps them divided. So it's still, once again, there's all these type of egregiousness, there's all these types of biases, there's all these types of oppressions, but all these different types of oppressions are coming from one group of people, the predator ruling class. And that needs to be concentrated on first, because once we take care of them, then we can get in a room and decide, decide what's best for all of us.
What you're saying is entirely true, but again,
yeah,
that doesn't mean that
I'm not offended by it. I'm not offended by it, Fee. I just don't believe it's the best tactic. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, but maybe it's not the best tactic. It's not the best tactic for the people that actually believe in that, though. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, it came into play with Ajamu was backing a lot of people behind that were calling the people who were talking at the Rage Against the War Machine racist.
Sure.
And they were using the
and
racism
he was wrong for that.
to separate
but this
that
is a completely
movement.
Different
Yeah, but it's still the same tactic applied in a different area. And I love Ajamu.
I don't think it's the same tactic.
Guys, by the way, too, as well, really quickly, while we have it up really quick, I just want to show everybody that we had a great show the other day. As you know, Terry Mattson does What the Hell is Going On in Latin America. What the F is going on in Latin America. And she had Ajamu, Margaret Flowers, and Terry Mattson on. I'm going to share the link. Jilly, if you find that link, if you can share it in all the places, please do so. It's great. Listen, fam, I'm not hating on Ajamu. I just don't believe it's the best tactic. That is just my personal opinion.
It's not the best tactic when you're talking to pro-Zionists, right-wingers, yes. But maybe that's not who he's talking to. You know?
I get it.
Like maybe that's not his audience.
I get it.
Because I have a hard time having a hard time with the word of because I do consider Zionism a form of fascism. And Vanessa Bailey will talk about that all day. We had her on the show to talk about there's really no difference between fascism and Zionism, just because Zionism is Jews are the supreme being. Hello, any race that's a supreme being, any peoples that's a supreme being is a fascist ideology. It's not just, about corporate. I do think there needs to be some accountability paid to that aspect of what's going on in the global South. It's no coincidence that all of the countries that have been subjugated by the West, by Europe, all happen to be in Africa, South America, Asia, and the Middle East. So you want people to ignore that element? It's not going to happen.
I don't think it's to ignore that element. I just think that a lot of times that people also don't realize that a lot of white people, especially white men, have also been used as pawns in these games and situations. They've been used as the soldiers who have died on the battlefield to fight for corporate interest. So even though there are bigger advantages given to people of color out there, and I would never ignore them, it's still at the end of the day, this is what I think we know now, and we've learned this from the COVID protocols, and a lot of this is their area and their blind side, is that whitey got to go too. They don't like any of us. They want us all fucking
obviously.
Gone. We're all useless eaters, and that's why I think that it's more important. Well, wait, I just want to say this. I think it's just more important we find that bond together, to come together, to take care of this predator ruling class, and then we can work these things out. And let's be honest, it's the programming, the way that people, this American exceptionalism, they've been programmed to think this way. We got to unprogram it. And I don't think if we use the tactics, I'm saying that Ajamu sometimes uses, and some of the people that, are part of a Black Alliance, not so much. I love Margaret Flowers and stuff. The way Jack Wee wrote about this, I just don't think it's the best tactic. You know what I'm saying? Even though it can't be ignored, it's just a way of talking. The Black Panthers and Fred Hampton talked in a specific way that brought people together, and that's what we need
But
to get back
they
to.
also mentioned race as well. They just didn't. You're just not highlighting that part. I think I agree that we should unite under a class war, but I also think that if you get it is so uncomfortable whenever somebody mentions anything about race, and there's no accountability to that in any way, it's not going to happen. You're never going to unite under that, because it's almost like you don't want to touch it, and like it's like you have to touch it, you have to acknowledge it, and then say, well, but this is the bigger problem that we're facing now. And I think if you don't touch it, you're never going to bring those people on your side.
The fact that this was a divisive tactic used to keep us separated, that it's always been divide and conquer. If they can't, they will never allow us to be divided over class. They want us divided over race because it's more divisive. And that has to be brought to, and that's never brought to attention by a lot of these people in these groups there. I'm sorry. You know what I'm saying? And I get it. And there's just a way of focusing on that.
I think it is by some people. I think you're generalizing.
They did talk about race. They didn't concentrate on race. They concentrated on what oppressions
but they still talked about it.
How they were both victims and under the boot of the state.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I mean, I just think that once again, I don't want to spend too much time on that. But let's
they
get
still talked about it though.
Sam,
they just didn't focus on it.
But I'm not my ego's not hurt by it. I just think there's better tactics and better ways and stuff. And I'm saying, so
yeah, I also think ignoring it is a danger though. Like ignoring it.
I don't think that it's being ignored. I think that a lot of people in a lot of these leftist groups are demanding that it be front and center, and that's where they're wrong.
They're demanding that it be front and center without any economic backing. That's different than acknowledging that it was and it is in some parts of the world, continues to be a thing. There's a difference between the liberals who like promote it just to get people to vote for them, or just to like, you know, go about it this way and hate, like literally want death to like, you know, a white person whose fault it's not their fault, versus like people who are pointing out a very real thing that happens in a part of the world. And I think acknowledging that versus there's a difference. Like it has to be backed by economics and class. But like you can't just say that it's not a thing at all. And I think like I don't know. Like I do think there's different
there's a
points of view depending on where you come from.
Solidarity in class than the recognition of Black oppression. Both can exist, but if one doesn't, they should go hand in hand together. Not this one be more important than that one. And unfortunately, we've seen this situation where I think that it's been like you either have to pay attention to this and recognize this first before we go here. And, you know, evident by the Answer Coalition and their rally removing abolish the CIA and just getting rid of it. It's like, okay, you're not understanding who the real oppressors are and who's keeping us down. And it's an entity within an entity with our government. And their biggest weapon is to keep us divided. If they keep us divided, then they can conquer. But I mean,
but Zionism is definitely, I mean, just like fascism, there is an element of like.
Well, I think the geopolitics is really fucking awful. It's stealing land and kicking people off their property and where their home is from, and then putting them into an open air prison. It's just fucking.
But why do they do that? They don't just do that for money. I mean, the government might do that for money, but they get the people to do that because of racism. Right. So the government might be looking at this. Oh, we need these resources. This is what people need to understand. So the government looks at this whole thing not in a racial way. It's not like these leaders, it's not like are sitting there and saying, oh, yes, like we actually hate brown people. No, they want these resources. That's all Israel is. It's a military asset of the United States to extract resources. It is, but they instill, right? They use the tactic of racism to divide the people for them to breed this hate. That doesn't mean that the hate doesn't exist and it hasn't been a thing. But that also doesn't mean that if you eliminate the hate, you're going to eliminate this, because this is what's really breeding this. And that's what your point is. And I get that.
And I think it's the same thing in Latin America, right, fam? It's not that they hate Latin people, right? I mean, they use the hate of the Latin people from the white people in the United States to go ahead and justify their actions. They use the hate of socialism and communism from the white Christian capitalists of the United States to fuel and justify their actions. But at the end of the day, what's going on in Latin America? A small group of people, that ruling class, that predator class, going in and extracting the resources from these people, forcing the monetary system on there while making sure that nobody can see any positive aspects of a collective government like socialism, combined with what they have, that free markets or their markets or whatever they want to do to form a better life. And that's what they want to see. And I think the geopolitics is the thing behind everything. It's about controlling everything on this planet, controlling the recesses. And now you've become the product and they want to control you. And I think that is something that needs to be front and center. I could be wrong, and maybe it's just me, stupid whitey, talking that way. I've been told a couple of times, like, of course you would feel that way. You're white. And it's not because I'm white and I feel that way. It's because I just believe that is the biggest problem we have right now, is this overreaching predator.
I mean, I agree with you that it's the biggest problem.
Huh?
I do agree with you that it's the biggest problem, but I also think you do have a certain point of view because of where you come from, as do I, as do other people that have lived different experiences.
I'm a gringo that can dance, and I was down in Cuba, and I've been to 6 Latin American countries. It don't make a difference where I come from. I can't help that. I can only fulfill my responsibilities moving forward.
Okay, so yes, Chris, I do think I love I love inviting. I think we've had Margaret on. We definitely have CJ on. I definitely love having this conversation. And Pasta, maybe the next panel, I could lead that discussion. But I feel like somebody like Pasta does need to be there so he can say these things and then have other people besides me respond. Because I think that's great. And he's put himself in these conversations. He's never shied away from that.
You know what I go through too as well, like when it comes to when I talk to my conservative friends, right? Like, and that's the beautiful thing. The Union of the Wanted People, which they're the truther community, but they're kind of framed as alt-right kind of conservatives, whatnot, because they lean that way. But they're fucking anarchists. They don't like any government. That's where they're at. But they've provided me a space to talk about collective governments and the type of socialism and communism that I've witnessed, to bring it to the table and explain why they go into these collective situations. So believe you me, ladies and gentlemen, I know what it's like on both sides of the aisle over here. I go into these spaces on the right, and I proudly present myself as a leftist, right? And I'm saying, listen, I'm an old school leftist. Anti-imperialist. I would ban fracking tomorrow. There's a lot of left positions I have. I believe that there should be social entities. I don't believe that corporations should own natural resources and energy. I don't believe they should own water and whatnot. So I do go in these spaces on the other side. So yeah, I would love to be a part of that whole thing. And I'm going to reach out to Margaret Kimberly because we love her. She's pretty awesome, fam. I'm sorry for talking on. Go ahead to get to the news about Turkey.
Yeah, so just Turkey's foreign minister today confirmed that Turkey condemns the attacks on Al-Aqsa. He met with Sergei Lavrov today, and he basically said that Israel needs to stop these attacks, that they are unacceptable, and that Turkey is not going to abandon the Palestinians. He literally said that. I was confused. I'm like, wait a minute, what have you been doing? You guys have been playing both sides here. Let's not pretend you haven't. This is why so many people don't trust Turkey or Turkey in their, what they say. However, I do think this is changing because the two talked about several things. There's going to be a nuclear power plant that they're going to be working on with Russia. They're also going to be working on extending the grain deal. There were I believe it was 28 million tons of grain exported. They want to make sure this continues. They also said that they were going to work on promoting peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which is huge. Continuing peace dialogue. Specifically, Turkey wants to be a mediator in potential peace between Israel and Palestine. Russia said that they also want that with a two-state solution. This is where Russia and I severely disagree. I do not believe that there is a possibility for a two-state solution because I don't believe you can live with a Zionist apartheid state. However, of course they're going to say that because they put diplomacy here. Like I've said before, both China, Russia, they literally always want to be diplomatic about things. And I'm not saying I'm not diplomatic, but there are things where you cannot be diplomatic about because it requires you to take a stance. And so I don't believe that there's going to be a two-state solution. I understand why people think that they think it's too far gone and so much has happened. But I just, unless Israel is neutralized, basically, I think they're going to continue in their plan. Now, what this whole thing means basically is that Israel is really losing allies, or losing its hold that it's had on the region, and that's why they're lashing out. And I do think that Israel does need war because of the internal upheaval it's having. A lot of people got that wrong. You know, we kind of mentioned this earlier. They wanted to paint Bibi as like this guy that's taking on the globalists. No, Bibi is a globalist. But I do think they need war because there's so much internal dispute going on within its own country that Israel needs to distract the population and bring them together. And nothing does that like war. The United States has taught us that, right? So that's essentially what Israel's trying to do. But I do think like Turkey is going to have to make a decision, and they have upcoming presidential elections. So this was a big deal actually today. Your favorite fam, Oksana Boyko, was in Ankara. She was reporting there, and so she was giving us the lowdown on the upcoming Turkish elections, which Russia has said they'll be neutral on. However, it's not about, it can be as neutral as they want. But the economy is going to be a big player in this. I think I believe next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Fam, do you think this is so? You think the CIA chief admits U.S. blindsided by Saudi-Iran deal? Top diplomats from Tehran and Riyadh met in Beijing on Thursday to reestablish contacts between long-time rivals. And they're surprised. I mean, that's how awful U.S. foreign policy is, fam.
Yeah, William Burns was surprised. Yeah.
Really? You're surprised at the fact that you act like a psychopath all the time, that your foreign policy is just, and that you think that they're not going to broker a deal. And that, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
There's some old friends of ours, fam, who made this video, put some videos out again. Oh, you got to blame China. They're just the same as the United States and stuff. Look what they did with Yemen. And they just brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
They're going to bring, if possible, this end to a war. It's been the most positive news we've had in Yemen for quite some fucking time. And you can see the picture right down here. You can see it right there. Right there. That picture means so much. In fact, let me make it bigger, fam. Look at that. 1,000 words, ladies and gentlemen. 1,000 words. So, got to call balls and strikes, fam. Got to call balls and strikes.
Yeah. So that's that for that section, I believe.
That is that for that section. One last section. We'll scream through it really quick. You got time, fam, or should we park it? You got time?
10 minutes, maybe like 10
minutes. Look, she got 10 minutes. Okay. So brought to you by Pfizer. Fam, our boy Robert F. Kennedy has announced that he's going to run. I had on a video this morning for the morning show. Steve was on assignment, and I had a video on of Neil deGrasse Tyson going on Del Bigtree. He had to go on because he's been so wrong about it that he had to go on and almost moonwalk and backpedal, because we were also talking about how everybody just got in line, how everybody sat out there and they slandered the consensus. The doctors who wanted to bring their personal opinion to the table to talk about the consensus was out of there, and they were just labeled, smeared, called a quack. Well, here's Jake Tapper still doing the same shit he's been doing for quite some time.
This just into CNN. Anti-vaccine quack Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission to run for president as a Democrat. In launching his presidential bid, Kennedy is the latest in a long line of family members to enter politics. So far, only Marianne Williamson, who last month launched her second long shot campaign, has entered the Democratic primary against Biden. Kennedy is such a healthcare menace. In 2019, even his cousins wrote an op-ed criticizing his anti-science views on life-saving vaccines. Coming up next, this just into CNN, anti-vaccine.
Fam, anti-vaccine quack. I mean, they won't fucking stop. They just will not stop. RFK is now filed to challenge Biden for 2024 in the Democratic nomination. Robert Kennedy Jr. on Wednesday filed a statement of candidacy with the Federal Election Commission, positioning him to oppose President Biden for the 2024 Democratic nomination. Though he hasn't formally announced his candidacy, the 69-year-old Kennedy's previous messaging about possible run gave some insight to his potential themes. My top priority would be to end the corrupt merger between the state and corporate power. Oh, fam, he's talking about ending fucking fascism that has ruined our economy, shattered our middle class, polluted our landscapes and water, poisoned our children, and robbed our values and our freedoms. Last month, Kennedy asked supporters to help him decide if he should run or not, directing them to visit him, the website teamkennedy.com, to volunteer or donate money. If it looks like I can raise the money and mobilize enough people to win, I will jump in the race, he said via Twitter, fam. And there is one other video I wanted to play right down over here. This is Scott Horton. Just really quick. He goes, over at CIA's Special Activity Center, now that he's joining, he's got the Rambo thing, fam.
So I have a kind of different. Didn't Kennedy praise his son for going to support Ukraine?
Well, he didn't praise his son, but he did talk about it. It is the area of concern. I mentioned it to Gerald Celente on the morning show, fam, that with Megyn Kelly, he was talking about his son going over and fighting in that war, and did normalize it a little bit. It was one of my concerns. You know what I'm saying? He didn't talk really from a political point of view. He just talked about his nephew wanting to go over and fight.
Really? Because I remember the tweet being sort of praising his son or his nephew. Was it his nephew or son? I forget which one it was, but it was like,
it was his nephew.
Look, I'm proud of my nephew for blah blah blah. It was something along those lines.
It wasn't good.
So
it wasn't good.
So here's the thing. We don't have fair elections. So I really think, again, the presidential shit is a distraction. I do think Americans, every single one, gets caught up in this stuff. I don't really think he really poses a threat. Yeah. If he was actually old school Bobby Kennedy, my reaction would be different. But I just don't see him as a Bobby Kennedy. I see him more as like a conservative trying to infiltrate the Democratic Party. And
I don't see him as that. Definitely not. I mean, I don't think he's as good as Bobby or his nephew, or his uncle, excuse me. But I think he's got a lot of great things about him and a lot of things he could bring to the table. I would like to see more about his foreign policy. He does have
the only thing he's got going for him, Pasta, is the COVID stuff. I really don't. I haven't seen any sort of policy from him to say anything more beyond that, besides the COVID stuff.
Well, we have to see. Well, you're right. Let's not jump the gun. Let's see more. But let's listen to the Liberty
But
Report.
I thought you understood we don't have fair elections, so I don't.
Oh, I know that, and I don't expect him to win. Okay. But once again to get. Listen, a lot of times when you're running, it's not about. Sometimes when you lose, you win when you run elections. If you're losing elections, it's because you're not playing ball. But if you can change the conversation, if you can insert certain things into the conversation, that's important right now. You know what I'm saying? It's going to take a village. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of push to get some fair elections. We're far away from that. But once again, jumping into the debate, jumping into the conversation, I think that's very important. And if he gets a lot of bodies in the streets to follow him, that will move people in a certain direction. That's what it takes momentum. And I think he could build some momentum.
I do agree on the momentum aspect. Yeah.
His speech at the in DC was masterful. Let's take a look at this Liberty Report. Let's see what you think though on what the boys have to say about this.
And the thing that's interesting about this is on foreign policy, he's going to be able to outflank Trump a little bit, I think, because Trump has been very good, we have to say, when he says, what the heck is wrong? Why can't we get along with Russia? Why are we in this war? You know, he's good on that. But I think RFK Jr. articulates a much more cohesive idea, and he blasts the neocons, which we love. Let's put this next one up. This is a tweet of his from just a couple of days ago. And this basically sums up everything that we've been talking about for a couple of years. He says, and this is long if you'll indulge me, Dr. Paul, he says, the collapse of U.S. influence over Saudi Arabia and the kingdom's new alliances with China and Iran are painful emblems of the abject failure of the neocon strategy of maintaining U.S. global hegemony with aggressive projections of military power. China has displaced the American empire by deftly projecting instead economic power. And this is great. He says, over the past decade, our country has spent trillions bombing roads, ports, bridges, and airports. China spent the equivalent building the same across the developing world. And that sounds like, what you said over and over. We bomb them, they build it. But this last part I really like. The Ukraine war is the final collapse of the neocons' short-lived American century. The neocon projects in Iraq and Ukraine have cost $8.1 trillion, hollowed out our middle class, made us a laughing stock of U.S. military power and moral authority, pushed China and Russia into an invincible alliance, destroyed the dollar as a global currency, cost millions of lives, and done nothing to advance democracy or win friendships and influence. A long statement, but he pretty much put it all there.
You can understand why the establishment's not anxious to see him be successful.
Fam.
So he says a lot of the things that a lot of us have been saying, but at the same time, he also poses it as the U.S. Is no longer the empire, and that's a bad thing. And that's one of the things I do worry about it, because he's right about China building things while we've been destroying them. But it's a goal for us to continue being an empire. It shouldn't be, right? He says he's against the neocons. I'm sorry if I don't have faith in another politician, because I will never have that again in the United States. So I'm just being extremely critical because of that. I do think that he'd be better off is where he's at right now and what he's done thus far. It would take a lot of convincing for me to buy that he's going to be any different than any of the other politicians, just based on the lack of foreign policy, just based on the time around, just based on the co-option of everything, based on the fact that he's running as a Democrat. Yeah, that whole situation. I can't take anybody seriously that's running as a Democrat. And again, like, we don't have fair elections. So even though you're right that there has to be a momentum, I think that every 4 years, Americans get distracted paying attention to this, and the rest of the time they sit on their ass and do absolutely nothing to actually change anything. And they think one person coming into an office that's not in charge of anything is going to change things. And I just think that is the dumbest thing in the entire world. So,
well, fam, I'd like to keep debating with you a little bit more, but it's getting too late over there for you, and I'm ready to wrap up. I've been going since this morning. Like I said, Steve was on assignment. We had on Danny Shaw. We had on Courtney Banks, and her sister jumped in at the very end to say hello. Wyatt Reed. It was an amazing show. Great show with you today. I am going to be putting up the video tomorrow, releasing for your Saturday enjoyment, an interview with Carl Zog, guys. We went an hour and 40 minutes. It was awesome. A lot of information there. I implore you to watch it. It's very important right now, since that the conservatives seem to be jockeying for war with China, and that is very, very scary. So we asked a lot of great questions today. Asked Pasta earlier, but Fiorello, what are your thoughts on Sirhan's motive for killing RFK, i.e. over Senator Rob Kennedy's military support to Israel during the Six-Day War? Justified?
if that is true, I still don't think it's justified, because, I mean, then you could go around killing a lot of people for a lot of things, right? But I do think that I think one of our old school friends is working on getting him free, Sirhan, and because the family has stood against his freedom, he has been put up for parole for a while, and I think at this point the guy, maybe he should be free. I do think there's a lot more to it than that, though.
Well, a lot of people believe. A lot of people believe that for sure that he was MK Ultra'd. Over on Rockfin,
I do too.
A lot of people believe that, including the Kennedys. Aram tipped. Thank you, says all the best. Aram, thank you. We love you. We appreciate everything you do for us. We appreciate everything you do for the show, and we appreciate all those people who joined in today to watch both shows. I think I got a lot of pasta in one day, fam. A lot of carbs today. Eli Marino also said, and Fascism was invented in America, Jim Crow South. Mussolini's definition is one part of fascism. Even Marxists have several definitions which reflect the different aspects of it. So
it's definitely not just one. Yeah.
Way to go, Eli Moreno. Way to go and agree with Fee and just to put me down, bro. A long day and we have to end it. And DC also says that kind of contradicts the previous stance regarding current events in Palestine. Thank you so much. Hashtag Free Sirhan is what he says. And thank you guys. So that's it for today, fam. Anything going on this weekend?
Other than I'm resting after working a lot, no. So I'm gonna have it's warmer here. You want to hear what's warm? It's gonna be like 55 degrees, and I'm super excited.
Nice.
The sun's gonna be out, 55 degrees. I get to not wear my heaviest jacket. Who the hell am I? Like I was freezing below 70, and now it's like 55, and I'm ready to wear a swimsuit. This is like, but by the way, it doesn't get dark in Russia till like 7:30, almost 8 now, and it's only April. By the time it's like June or July, it doesn't get dark. Like there's like 2 hours of night, not even. And then it's like the sun's out all day. So you really have to shut those curtains. So I'm really excited for summer in Moscow. But we'll see.
Oh, wait, we do have one more Super Ray. It looks like here. Free Thinker. Let me put it up there, fam. Can you read this one? Because I'm getting tired. Hold on.
You mean you're getting old? I know.
Fam.
Pasta's birthday is next week, a week from today. So we should have a birthday celebration. Free Thinker 59 tipped $5. Pasta, I want you to come on David Knight, America's Unplugged, Gardner Goldsmith, or Knights of the Storm to discuss foreign relations on election integrity if invited. I told them you probably would if you could. Okay.
Dude, I would go on David Knight in a heartbeat. I love David
don't know who
Knight.
any of those people
not
are.
Because I'm a big David Knight fan, but I mean, I don't because I agree with him. I'm a big fan of his and I try to get my mom to watch him. I'm like, Mom, stop watching Levin. Liberty Levin, whatnot, because they have the same look. They're like older, distinguished men. You know what I'm saying? My mom says my mom was like, oh, David Knight's way better looking than Mark Levin or whatever his name is and stuff. But they got the desk with, the notes and all the papers out there. And David Knight's got that voice over here. Like, you know what I'm saying? Nixon was a globalist. Any of those, I'll go on talk election integrity anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. I love to do it. Thank you, Free Thinker, for the love. And thank you guys, everybody who supported the show. Thank you to everybody who hit up our Patreon. Thank you to all those who leave tips every day, who's got a subscription here on Rockfin. If you can find out a way to help and you want to help independent media, please do so. Every bit helps. So that's it for today. For Pasta Jardula.
Me. And, combo
Pasta
out
on the ones and twos.
Pasta's turning 60, not 50. Combo out. April 14th, 1912 is his birthday.